The night hung heavy, shrouded in a dense, foggy silence that seemed to swallow the world whole. The taxi driver, weary from hours on the road, sat slumped behind the wheel of his car. His eyes, tired and bloodshot, flicked between the empty road ahead and the glowing numbers on his dashboard clock. 2:13 a.m. It was late, too late for any more rides, but he couldn't afford to call it a night just yet. He needed the money. His car hummed softly beneath him as it rolled through the quiet, deserted streets. Streetlights flickered past, casting long, distorted shadows that seemed to bend and stretch unnaturally. Everything about this night felt wrong. The city, usually brimming with life and noise, lay unnervingly still. There was no sound, no late-night conversations, no distant hum of traffic, just silence. The driver tapped his fingers nervously on the steering wheel, his mind wandering. He glanced into the rearview mirror, out of habit more than curiosity. The back seat was empty, of course. Still, he couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that had been growing inside him all night, a gnawing sense of being watched. But there was no one there, only him and the road. A sudden ping broke the silence, startling him from his thoughts. His phone blinked to life with a new ride request. He hesitated for a moment, glancing at the map. The pickup location was far out, on the very edge of town, near the old country roads, an area he rarely visited. His first instinct was to ignore it, but something about the stillness of the night, the strange pull of the unknown, made him tap accept. Besides, it was money. He turned the car around, heading out of the city and into the countryside. The roads grew narrower, twisting and winding, in ways that felt unnatural. The trees on either side of the road thickened, their skeletal branches stretching like bony fingers, casting eerie shadows across his path. The further he drove, the more isolated he felt. The warm glow of the city lights was now far behind him, swallowed by the thickening fog. The world felt smaller out here, quieter. His headlights barely cut through the dense mist that clung to the road, and the GPS on his phone flickered occasionally, struggling to keep up in this forgotten part of town. The driver's fingers tightened around the wheel, his knuckles white. He didn't like this. Something wasn't right. He was close to the pickup location now, just a few hundred meters away. The fog grew thicker, wrapping around the car like a living thing, swallowing the night whole. And then, just as the GPS indicated he had arrived, he saw them. A figure standing at the edge of the road, barely visible in the dim glow of his headlights. The passenger didn't move, didn't wave him down like most people would. They simply stood there, perfectly still, as though they had been waiting for him for a very long time. The driver slowed the car to a stop, hesitating for a moment. Something about the figure unsettled him. Their stillness, their silence. But he had come all this way. With a sigh, he unlocked the doors. The figure moved slowly, almost too slowly, as they approached the car. The door creaked open, and without a word, they slid into the back seat. The driver caught a glimpse of them in the rearview mirror, just a shadowy outline in the darkness. They wore a long coat and a wide-brimmed hat that cast their face in shadow, hiding any distinct features. He waited for the usual question. Where to? But the passenger said nothing. They didn't speak at all. The only sound was the soft creak of the car as they settled into the back seat. The driver glanced at the GPS, his finger hovering over the start ride button, unsure of what to do. But the destination was already marked, further down the road, deeper into the fog. The car pulled back onto the road, the silence growing heavier with each passing mile. The driver kept glancing into the mirror, trying to get a better look at his passenger. But they remained in shadow, their face obscured, never moving, never speaking, just sitting there, as though they weren't entirely real. Minutes passed, though it felt like hours. The fog outside the windows thickened, pressing against the car like a living thing. The road ahead seemed endless, stretching out into the void. He tried to focus on driving, but the unease gnawed at him. The silence inside the car was too much, too unnatural. And then it happened. Without a word, without even a sound, the passenger communicated something. Not with their voice, but with their presence, as though an invisible hand had reached into the driver's mind, planting a memory he had buried long ago. Flashes of light, a dark road, the screech of tires, the sickening thud of a body against metal. His heart raced as the memory resurfaced, unwanted, terrifying. It had been years since that night, years since the accident. He had told no one. He had driven away, leaving the scene, leaving the person behind in the darkness. He had convinced himself it was an accident. No one would ever know. But now, sitting in his back seat was someone who did. His hands tightened on the wheel, knuckles white. He glanced into the rearview mirror again, and for the first time the passenger's face came into focus. It was them, the person he had left behind all those years ago, pale, hollow-eyed, their lips curled into a twisted smile that seemed to know too much. His heart pounded in his chest, a cold sweat running down his back. He slammed on the brakes, the car screeching to a halt in the middle of the desolate road. The driver's breath came in quick, shallow gasps. He turned in his seat, ready to confront the passenger, but the back seat was empty. There was no one there. He stumbled out of the car, his legs weak beneath him. The fog had grown impossibly thick, swirling around him like a living thing. He spun around, looking for the passenger, for any sign of them. But there was nothing. Just the endless road, the silent trees, and the oppressive fog closing in on him from all sides. His breathing quickened, panic setting in. He had to get back in the car. He had to leave. But when he turned to look at his car, the fog swallowed it too, leaving him standing alone in the darkness. And then from the fog came a whisper, soft, almost gentle. "You can't run from the past." The driver's heart froze in his chest. He spun around, but there was no one there. The road was empty, silent, as though he had never been there at all. The wind whistled through the trees, carrying with it a final, ghostly whisper. "See you again, soon."